California's dairy farm families are demonstrating their commitment to future generations and our shared climate, water, air, soil, communities, and planet. More than 300 dairy methane reduction projects are already being adopted across California dairy farms. This includes biogas digesters, which capture methane to create renewable energy. California is home to more than 16 clusters of dairy digesters. Clusters are groups of digesters that share a centralized facility, where captured biogas is upgraded and then injected into natural gas pipeline. More than 200 miles of pipeline is already complete. The gas can then be used as carbon-negative transportation fuel, replacing the use of diesel in heavy-duty trucks. Biogas can also be used to produce hydrogen for powering cranes, trucks, and other equipment, such as those being piloted now at the Port of Los Angeles. Through another innovative strategy, biogas is being converted into electricity via fuel cells installed on the farm. Clean electricity is created 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and is powering BMW electric cars on California highways. Beyond the use of digesters, dairy farmers are embracing other innovative strategies, including exploration of feed additives for their potential to reduce enteric methane, methane that's released naturally from cows. Our dairy farmers are also implementing a variety of alternative manure management projects that improve handling and storage to avoid methane production. These efforts also help to build healthy soils and protect water resources, while greatly reducing the need for synthetic fertilizers. Working with our universities, state officials, and other agricultural professionals, dairies are exploring ways to enhance manure's role in building healthy soils, aiming to provide valuable soil amendments for use across California's diverse agricultural landscape. Several new and innovative manure management technologies are being demonstrated to further protect water quality, reduce GHGs, and improve the use of nutrients. This includes an algae raceway that removes nitrogen from manure effluent and purifies the remaining water. Another innovative strategy uses the digestive power of worms and microbes to remove up to 99% of wastewater contaminants, while also reducing GHGs. These are just a few examples of groundbreaking on-farm solutions being explored as farms work toward greater protection of our groundwater resources. In the meantime, dairy farmers also participate in local efforts to ensure residents have immediate access to safe drinking water via free bottled water delivery or access to bottle filling stations. For dairy farmers, protecting water resources has been an ongoing commitment, and it starts with reducing or conserving use. California dairy farmers use 88% less water to produce 1 gallon of milk than they did 50 years ago. Through water-smart management practices, they continue advancing water use efficiency and conservation. About 40% of a California dairy cow's diet is made up of byproducts from other crops, such as almond hulls, citrus pulp, or cottonseed, greatly reducing the need for water and other resources used to grow feed crops. Our dairy farms also recycle water, using the same drop up to 4 times before ultimately using it to flush barn floors and irrigate feed crops. Using a cutting-edge subsurface drip irrigation system, some dairies are applying water and manure nutrients directly to the crop's root zone, improving protection of groundwater and reducing GHGs while shrinking water use. This practice has demonstrated a 38% increase in water efficiency while maintaining or increasing crop yields. Our farms are also reducing their use of energy, switching to LED lighting and more efficient pumps and equipment, installing solar energy, all while helping the state meet ambitious clean energy goals. More than 150 California dairies are generating clean, renewable energy to offset their on-farm needs. And by converting equipment, including feed mixers from diesel to electric, they are helping clean the air we all breathe while cooling the planet. Investment in the future isn't just demonstrated through technologies, but in actions, like partnering with conservationists to help restore a threatened species, or participating in multi-stakeholder efforts to address complex community challenges. By working collaboratively and sustainably producing nutritious milk, California dairy families are supporting the environment and the health and livelihoods of local communities. These partnerships and investments show how dairy farm families are playing an important role in a planet-smart future.
Good morning. I'm Michael Bocadoro, Executive Director of Dairy Cares, and welcome to Planet Smart Dairy Showcase. I'm still truly amazed when I think about the progress that has been made in the dairy sector here in California in terms of not just climate smart dairy farming, but planet smart dairy farming. And today we've got three great panelists for you to learn a little bit more about some of these activities. Emily Rooney, President of Agricultural Council, where she advocates for over 15,000 farmers, family farmers across California, including many dairy farm families here in the state. We've got Steve Shahade, who's a third generation dairy farmer. Yes, a real dairy farmer, real family dairy farmer from Fresno County. And he and 7 other members of his family own the Bar 20 Dairy and are active with Producers Dairy in Fresno. And then finally, Ashley Boren, who is the Executive Director of Sustainable Conservation. She also serves on the California State Board of Food and Agriculture. And she has worked tirelessly as a key partner with the ag and dairy sectors here in California to help identify and scale sustainable solutions. And I cannot speak enough to that and how important that's been to everything we're doing here in California. So with those introductions, we're going to go ahead and get started with a few questions for our panelists. And Steve, we're going to start with you. A lot of what we saw in that video are actually sustainable practices that you've implemented on your farm. The electric feed mixer, the solar energy system, and more recently, the digester. And the digester always blows my mind when I'm thinking about the fact that cows are powering the ultimate EV driving machine, BMWs, in California today. So why don't you talk a little bit about those projects and how you made the decision to make those significant investments in some of the sustainable practices that you've implemented?
Yes, Michael. Well, it all starts out with, to me, what is sustainability? And I looked up several different definitions, but the one that kind of hits home to me, where it talks about to pursue sustainability is to create and maintain the conditions under which humans and nature can exist in productive harmony to support present and future generations. And I'm third generation. Our family's been in the dairy business since 1950. And it started with my grandfather and my parents that always said, well, try to do the right thing, do what's right, care about your employees, your customers, and your environment. I'm third generation. There's 8 of us, and fourth generation is over 20. So we live in the valley. Our milk produces food for people throughout the San Joaquin Valley. And it's always come down to do the right thing. And like my grandpa said, try to get a little better every day, And so the idea of digester started, it was a long road. Around 2007, we started thinking about a digester and, had some companies we were working with that didn't pan out, had some problems. We're not near a gas pipeline, so we didn't have that alternative. And so after years of persevering, we installed, before the digester, 2 megawatts of solar, one for the farm and one for the dairy. We've replaced all of our lighting with LED, and just, for us, it's a long-term commitment to our business. We're not going anywhere. We're investing in our future, and you can't really control what you get paid for your milk, but you can control things like costs. And to us, being able to control some of our energy costs, which we all know in California seems to be rising every month when you get your check. And so it's about, not complaining, but controlling what you can control, because there's a lot of parts in farming that you can't, your feed prices, your milk prices, but sustainability, doing what's right, and looking in the future. It's now that we've got this done, what else can we do? What have we learned? And for us, it's we have extra gas. We're looking at partnering with another company that's looking to produce hydrogen fuel for transportation. And so that seems like a pretty good story to me. Let's use renewable power to produce renewable transportation fuel. And as we all know, water's another thing. So what can we do to reduce our water footprint? Like Michael said, dairy's done an extravagant job since 1950 of reducing our water footprint, our feed footprint, and producing more milk with much less. So I think that's kind of our motto. How can we be more efficient? It's not about milking more cows, but doing more with what you have, right. Looking at new technologies and doing a better job.
Yeah, and the water is probably a great transition for me to move on to Ashley with her first question. And sustainable conservation has been partnering with dairy farmers for years. I don't know that there is a more important issue facing California this year than water. We're in the midst of another long-term, very significant drought, maybe the most significant drought we've ever had. We'll know, at the end of the year. But one of the most exciting projects that sustainable conservation has led was recognized at our last virtual summit, and we just heard about it a little bit more in the video. So tell us more about your work to develop the manure drip irrigation system and promote its adoption across California.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, and thanks for inviting me to join the panel today. You are right. Sustainable Conservation's partnered with California Dairies, I think it's now over 20 years, and been very focused on identifying manure management practices that reduce greenhouse gases and protect water quality, and importantly, also work economically for dairies. And for those of you who don't know, Sustainable Conservation, we're a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to helping California thrive by uniting people to solve environmental problems in ways that make economic sense. And I just want to say, we want California to have a thriving agricultural economy, and we also want it to have a healthy environment, and we really believe that both are possible. So we've tested a number of different manure management options, but as the one that Michael's mentioning is we're particularly excited about, and that's the subsurface drip irrigation system that was featured in the video. And we're excited about it because of its benefits, both for dairy and the environment. We came up with the idea for the system with Nate Ray of DeJager Dairy during the last drought, because we were observing dairy producers switching to drip irrigation to save water, but they were using commercial fertilizer to fertilize their silage. And so knowing both the value of manure as a fertilizer, and then thinking about the fact we didn't want dairies to have more surplus manure because they were using commercial fertilizer, to create a drip irrigation system that used that liquid manure. So we first piloted the idea with Netafim and the DeJager Dairy to work through all the issues. And then we expanded it to 3 additional dairies in different parts of the valley with different dairying systems. And the results have really been fantastic. As the video said, the system allows the same or more corn to be grown with about 38% less water, 45% less nitrogen, and 70% fewer irrigation-related greenhouse gas emissions, and that's compared to traditional flood irrigation. So it's really a winning system on so many fronts. NRCS Conservation Innovation Grants made our work on the system possible, and because of the strong environmental benefits, the NRCS has made the system one of its officially approved practices. So it's eligible for cost share funding for up to 80% of the system's cost. And then the California Department of Food and Agriculture has also made the system eligible for funding through its SWEEP program. And in the most recent round of SWEEP, $2 million was set aside specifically for this technology. So there's been a lot of interest in it, particularly because of its water saving benefits. As we faced drought these past few years, we know of at least, I think, 50 dairies, and those are the ones we know about, who have expressed serious interest in the system. 33 of them have applied for either the EQIP or SWEEP funding, and I think at least 24 have already installed the system, or they've made a firm commitment to do so. The system, there's more demand for the system than there's incentive funding available via NRCS and CDFA. So we're also doing an analysis to understand when the system makes sense to install from an economic perspective, even without incentive funding. And we think that's probably when the cost of water for a dairy producer is about $211 per acre foot or more. And $200 or more per acre foot is becoming more common, particularly in times of drought like these that we're experiencing. So any dairy producers that are interested in learning more about the system, you can do so by visiting Sustainable Conservation's website at www.suscon.org, suscon.org. And we've got a write-up on the system there as well as a video. And you can also email us at manuresdi, so subsurface drip irrigation, manuresdi@suscon.org, or reach out to Dominic Rosini at NetFM.
No, great. And before I turn to Emily, just, I would think with both the drought and, increasing water scarcity due to the implementation of the Sustainable Groundwater Monitoring Act here in California, Management Act here in California, that we're going to see a lot more interest in that system as water becomes more scarce and frankly more expensive, as we all know. And I think, we're also concerned about, limitations on transfers going forward. So I can't say enough how important that system may be to the dairy sector in the future. And we look forward to working with you to try and get more money. If there's, we can always push for more funding, and I think that'll be critical. And speaking of advocating for dairy farmers here in California, that's a good transition for me to turn to Emily Rooney. As I mentioned, she advocates for hundreds of dairy farm families here in California as part of her broader activities. And it is amazing for all of us when we think about the progress we're making, the things we're doing, and the efforts that all of us put into finding more funding for these programs. So, tell us a little bit about the work you do, how, you tell these stories to the folks who make decisions about whether or not we receive funding, but share with us a little bit about what you're doing and what we can do more of in the future.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. And thanks for having me here today. Just by way of background, Ag Council is a statewide public policy association. We represent farmer-owned cooperatives and farmer-owned vertically integrated businesses here in California. And the bulk of our work is here in Sacramento in the downtown area. So we work on legislation and the regulatory arena on all of these policies that impact not only dairy, but also California agriculture. So, first and foremost, I've got to thank my dairy members for being a part of Ag Council. And the conversations we have are rarely ever easy. But time and again, I've watched dairy producers step up to the plate when the tough issues are laid before them. And for that reason, I'm always impressed. But dairy has made so much progress on so many different levels. It's really easy frankly, to tell the story when we go into these elected officials' offices. Before I ever even got to Ag Council, the video said it. The industry was reusing agricultural byproducts for feeds, such as almond hulls and citrus pulp. And now the state continues to focus on reusing and recycling products. So there's a good story to tell there. Over the last 50 years, dairies reduces water use by using recycling practices and reusing practices, and reduced water use by 88%. And of course, this summit has been focusing a lot on climate issues, and there's been tremendous amount of work on dairy digesters, but also alternative manure management practices, which are a big deal for the dairy industry to step up to the plate to address some climate issues. And now the industry is looking at healthy soils and whether or not dairy has a role to play in increasing organic matter in the soil, which can help with water retention and sequestering carbon in areas that make sense. So dairy continues to innovate not only in the marketplace, but also environmentally. So it makes it very easy for me to tell the story. So thank you for that.
Lots more to come. I'm gonna.
Right.
No, it is. It seems like every day I learn about something new. You know, the Port of LA story about making hydrogen, you know, using dairy biogas as a feedstock was another one of those just aha moments for me as I think about it. And as we tell that story to policymakers and regulators, it seems to be an aha moment for them. But it's a reminder, and I know Steve mentioned that, you know, looking at partnering with a hydrogen company as well, and I'm going to ask him about that in a moment. But it is amazing to me, you know, when we start to think about dairy biomethane, and we're making carbon negative transportation fuel with it today for heavy duty vehicles, and you know, but we can easily evolve in the future with the state's transportation sector to make electricity, to make hydrogen also for the transportation sector. And I think we're one of the few biofuels that really has that flexibility. And that's something, you know, we all probably need to talk a little bit more about. But Steve, I'm going to turn back to you for a moment. And you mentioned briefly, you know, the solar system. And so you're eliminating, you know, your fossil fuel use associated with energy on your farm. You mentioned your digester and the good work you're doing with BMW and reducing your manure methane emissions on your dairy farm. Talk a little bit more about your feed mixer and what's next for Bar 20 Dairy, and you know, as you continue to look at sustainable solutions, what other areas are you looking at?
Yes, Michael. The feed mixer, of course, that ties right into the digester, because the digester is producing renewable energy to offset that electricity that mixes our feed for us and reduces our diesel usage on the dairy. And again, two very important things, like Ashley talked about, is water savings. How can we save more water? We've converted some of our ground to drip, and we'll probably reach out to Ashley and see how we can get some of our silage in that. We're looking at other technologies that can use a fraction of the amount of water to grow feed. So I think technology is very interesting, and keeping an open mind and evaluating what's out there. But as far as the transportation fuel, I mean, we've got a company that's started out, they were going to put in about 60 to 80 acres of solar, and right next to our dairy. And so we said, well, if we've got extra biogas, let's partner up and provide the methane gas from a digester, which produces power day and night, you know, clouds or no clouds. Just seems like a good fit. How can we utilize what we have to be more efficient? It's a good story.
Great. I'm going to turn back to Ashley real quick here. And clearly more work to be done on the waterfront. That's not a short-term issue for the ag community and the dairy sector here in California. And as you know, it has implications for, you know, water quality related issues too. What's next? You know, where are we headed next with Susquehanna and your partnership with Ag and Dairy in California?
You know, specifically with California Dairies, we're focused on two primary strategies in partnership with you. First, it's really promoting more precise application of manure as a fertilizer to reduce nitrate leaching to groundwater and protect that groundwater. And the subsurface drip irrigation system I talked about earlier is definitely our key effort there. The second is, you know, identifying how the surplus manure on a dairy can be used in a value-added, economically viable way. And we've done quite a lot of work in a couple areas. One, to make it easier for dairies to compost their dairy manure and export it to other agricultural operations. We've been working to try to make the regulatory process easier. So we've had success with the water quality permitting for composting on dairies, and we'll be working in partnership with the industry to clarify the air quality permitting requirements and related costs. Our newest effort, which I'm very excited about, and it's still very much in development, is seeing if other crops can use that same subsurface irrigation system using the liquid manure. And we're working with the same set of partners, DeJager Dairy, Netafim, and also UC Cooperative Extension, to try the system on processing tomatoes and almonds. And the plan is to test the idea, comparing it to an adjacent control fields that use standard drip irrigation, and then we'll monitor for yields, food safety issues, and benefits like reduced fertilizer inputs and costs and reduced greenhouse gas emissions. So we're very excited about that effort. And then I guess I'd also mention that Ryan Flaherty of our team has been co-chairing a CDFA task force with JP Catavella, focused on solutions for dairies that have surplus manure. And that's called the Manure Recycling and Innovative Products Task Force. And it includes members from the national and California dairy industry, among others. And they're making recommendations on different technologies and practices that need to be tested and evaluated to see if they'll work on California dairies. And our goal is really to support development of a toolbox that has a variety of tools so that dairies with surplus manure can select a tool that's going to work best for their unique situation. And I think Ryan's going to be speaking more about that at 1:10 today in the session called Solving the Nutrient Surplus and Ensuring Water Quality.
Yeah, that's a very important effort. So we very much appreciate that you have allowed Ryan to take some time out of his busy schedule and be part of that discussion. I know Emily and I both sat in on a few of those meetings, and I'm actually very excited about some of the advanced manure management technologies, Biofiltro in particular, and the Algae Raceway that we had in the video. I think are both really tremendous technologies that could provide a lot of benefit, not just on the climate side, but on the water quality side. And that's a great transition for me to go back to Emily with the next question. And groundwater protection is another big issue and challenge, not just for the dairy sector, but the farming community here in California, and providing clean drinking water to the communities in which we live and produce food. So can you talk a little bit about the efforts that dairy farmers are participating in to make sure that we have clean drinking water for our communities and the families that live there?
Yeah, sure, Michael. As you can imagine, the drinking water crisis in our state is very complex. And so I'll kind of start at the state level and then go down to the local level and kind of end on the big picture. But statewide, California has about 1 million people without access to clean drinking water. That's for a variety of reasons. Obviously, we've got chronic drought, we have groundwater contaminants as well. And so a few of us in the agricultural community joined together with some folks, some individuals from environmental justice a few years ago to try to identify and create a fund that could help with some of the funding gaps to address the crisis. And so basically what we were looking at the time was there were different buckets of money through bond dollars and federal dollars, but there were no funds that could help put the whole piece of the puzzle together. So to help with operation and maintenance, as an example, that can't be covered by bond dollars, provide emergency drinking water, things like that. And so ultimately through those efforts, Governor Newsom signed legislation which created the Safe and Affordable Fund for Equity and Resilience. The acronym is SAFER. And it's a fund here at the State Water Board where the state dedicates $130 million per year for this cause. It is just a drop in the bucket in terms of need, given the size and scope of the crisis here in California. So it's not the end all or be all situation to solve the crisis. So for funds dedicated with local dollars and dollars will help drive solution. So we've got dollars coming in, right? And then and that is now starting to launch work at the local level. And this is where the dairy producers come in. So at the local level, dairy producers, along with other farmers and community leaders, work in these areas that we refer to as management zones. And basically, they are assessing the drinking water problems. And in these management zones, they can raise money locally, and they can leverage the SAFER dollars and any federal dollars to achieve the drinking water crisis. Through these local efforts, residents in these communities now have access to free testing of their wells, and then also emergency water, which is a big deal. It is a very strong collaboration, and dairy producers are paying into and participating in these local programs. I'll give you one example. Recently, the Valley Water Collaborative was actually created, I think in about 2020 or so. And this is an effort in the Modesto Turlock area. And basically what happens there is the Valley Water Collaborative will provide free testing. And if a well does not meet the drinking water standard, the collaborative will provide bottled water or water treatment system for the community. As a result of if we learn that it's nitrate related, the dischargers help offset the cost of that project. If it's something else like arsenic or something like that, the state will come in and help assist in offsetting that cost. So it's a very strong local effort that is just getting off the ground. I'm very excited about it. It was able to benefit from the SAFER Fund. I think there was a grant of just over $5 million there. So that's a big deal. And it's my hope that those types of projects will continue throughout the state of California. But at the end of the day, when this drinking water crisis in the state of California is solved, and when I use the word solved, I recognize that we're still going to be dealing with operation and maintenance costs, emergency water when there's a disruption in a system, something like that. But when the residents of the state have access to clean water, I mean, it might be a little idealistic, but it's my expectation that this could be one of the largest collaborative drinking water programs in the nation. When I talk to my colleagues in other states about this issue, there are little projects here and there dealing with drinking water, but nothing with the size or scope of what we're taking on here in California. So it's just something really that we should all be proud of, and I'm glad it's finally getting off the ground.
No, it's a great effort. I don't think that clearly goes without saying, and I do think we need to talk about it more, because I'm not sure, in my dealings with the Air Resources Board and some of the other agencies, it seems like they sometimes are not fully aware of the good efforts that are being undertaken under some of their sister agencies. And we always talk about improved coordination and collaboration with our agencies in California. But I think this is a story that we need to all work together to do a better job of telling the story. It's another great story, and people need to hear it because it helps us across the board. Biodiversity and resource conservation is also another piece of this. We saw a little bit about the tricolored blackbird in the video. And, Steve, good or bad, your farm has been a favorite nesting place for endangered tricolored blackbirds. And you've been working with the NRCS and other organizations to help protect the birds, even when that means delaying or canceling the harvest of your feed crops. Tell us why you think it's important to rise to that challenge, help conserve this species, and how support from NRCS makes that all possible.
Well, again, when we talk about sustainability, we talk about humans and nature existing together to support present and future generations. So it's only natural. Yes, every year Audubon Society comes out and about this time, and we drive around with them and look at fields. And we've got some water storage lagoons that right next to our forage. So we plant a beardless wheat that we can delay harvest on. In fact, we've got 2 fields that we're going to be delaying this year, over 30 something acres. And so we just kind of figured out a way around it. When the birds are gone, they tell us, okay, you're okay to go in there and chop, and we'll bale the feed, and we'll both be okay. So yeah, I mean, talk about environmentalists. I mean, every day when we irrigate, there's flocks of birds in fields and enjoying our water storage lagoons. And we got turtles and fish and birds every day you drive around. So it's just, we're all sharing the same planet here.
No, and it's a great story, and it just, I think, also demonstrates the adaptability of the farming community. Is if we identify issues, there's many times where we can identify solutions, as you have with the changing what you're planting, and which changes the harvest season a little bit, that allows the birds to nest without dramatic implications, financial implications for your farm. And those are the examples, again, that I think are just wonderful. And, we're not only protecting the environment, but we're protecting, the birds and others that inhabit our environment here in California. So, and I know incentive programs have played a role in that. And I guess this is a question for all of you, and we'll start with Ashley. And, work our way through. What is the role of incentive programs as we move forward with enhanced sustainability?
Well, incentives are fantastic because they help defray costs, particularly for trying new things or for doing things that have, public benefits that you can't completely recover through just the private, operation. And so actually, I think the tricolored blackbird example, Steve, is a great one. And I just want to emphasize that's a fantastic collaboration between the dairy industry and the environmental community, with Audubon California playing the lead role. And when those two, the dairy industry and Audubon advocate together for incentive funding, it's even a more powerful ask, right? Because you're bringing together diverse interests to do that. So I think there's so many opportunities for that, and there's a lot more need for it. So we do need to do more.
Yeah, we've talked about incentives with just about every panel, I think, because they are so important to the farm community. And Emily, maybe you can shed a little bit of light for our listeners in terms of why they're so important for the farm community, and a little bit about the tremendous efforts and the amount of, sheer amount of funds that we've been able to achieve from the state and federal government, and how important they are.
Yeah, Michael, I mean, I've been doing this a while now, but what I find is in most cases, when there's an environmental challenge put before the industry, folks want to meet it, but in a lot of cases, the technology is just cost prohibitive, right? And on the food processing side, I can think of our folks that are in the cap and trade system. And one of my members was looking at putting in a new system to deal with the cap and trade regulation. It was 5 times their company-wide capital expenditure budget. And so this is where incentive dollars become so important. They're important on the, at the ground level with the farming community, but also at the food processing level. And it's really most of them are cost share programs. I think the ones we all deal with are all cost share programs. So everybody's got skin in the game, and it's just a great collaboration and opportunity for dairy producers and farmers and folks in the industry to partner with the state, in our case, and reach these environmental challenges. On the climate front, when you look at the Dairy Digester Program, AMP, Farmer Program, which is a tractor turnover program, Healthy Soils, FPIP, which is the Food Production Investment Program, which is for food processors, the state's invested over $1 billion in climate smart ag practices to date. And frankly, I think that that's driving some of the policy conversation in Washington, D.C. as well. It was like heads turned when we were saying, well, we've put in $1 billion. What are you guys going to do? It was almost like, playing poker a little bit. But we have a great story to tell, and it's been fun to be part of it.
No, I agreed. It really is, when you start to think about the sheer dollars that have been put in. I mean, it's over $700 million in state funding just for dairy methane reduction efforts. And so when we're probably well beyond it if we all sat down, well beyond $1 billion if we all sat down and calculated it. So Steve, the follow-up question for you on this topic is, how important have those incentives been into some of the projects that you've put in place on your dairy farm, solar and the feed mixer and the digester and the first fuel cell on a dairy anywhere in the world?
I think they're essential because it's not the dairymen. I mean, most dairies have a substantial amount of debt, and in order to go to the bank and because we're not pulling the money out of our pockets, we're having to convince our lenders, and that additional capital, makes them feel a little bit more comfortable, especially with new technologies, because they usually look backwards and try to compare costs of other projects. And so without the incentive, I don't think that the money would be out there to do these projects from the banks. And so it's a great partnership, and it's probably the reason we were able to do the projects that we did. I don't think we could have done them without some help.
I think that's clear, and we see that across the board. So we're running into that point where we're almost out of time. So this is where I'm going to ask you all quickly to give us one last message. If there's a takeaway message, we'll start with you, Ashley, for our listeners. What would you say that one critical message is going forward?
One. I'd say, well, I'm a collaborator, you know, in my DNA. So I guess my one message, in addition to being, you know, open to these new technologies, which I think are going to be really important to sustainability for the future for dairies, be open to partnerships, you know, be open to partnerships with organizations like Sustainable Conservation and others in the conservation community. I think there's a lot of power in them, and I think we can get a lot done together.
Great. Emily, you want to go next?
Ashley stole my my thoughts, but if I could just say on behalf of the agricultural community, one of the folks that tries to routinely, you know, cross these bridges, I know it's not easy, but bringing an open mind can really bear some strong fruit and get us some strong results. So I know the conversations are not always easy, but this industry knows that that the communities can also benefit from it. So thank you for all your work, and I'm glad to be part of it.
And Steve, real quick, what's your last message you'd like to leave folks with?
I think it's clear. Most ag wants to do the right thing, you know, and partnering with others and working together, you can always get more done with more people. So if we can work together and make things better, I think that's the way to go.
Perfect. Thank you all. You know, teamwork is critical, and this group, I think, you know, stressed the importance of teamwork and incentives very well for our listeners. So thank you all for joining us. Appreciate the time that you took out of your busy schedules.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.